How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're starting up Peiches, Daf 88 of Masechta BavaMetzia. Friends. Whatever, Chavre, what do you want me to tell you? BavaMetzia, it's the best. We're going to learn about Meiser. This is a Gevaldige Sugya, because at what point is produce chayiv in Meiser? It's great because it's such a basic sugya, and I can't remember if it's come up before. I mean, it's definitely come up. That's for sure. But I feel like not often do we actually get to jump right into it. So that's going to be nice. So here we go. Yeah, we start out with this machlekes Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Yochanan about at what point is produce chayiv in Meiser. We'll see some other things as well. Okay, interesting stuff. Oh my gosh, sorry, Mom. Okay, here we go. We're going to start at Pezayim with Beis all the way at the bottom. Rabbi Yanai says, Rabbi Yanai, Ein atevel mischayev b'meiser ad sheyireh pnei aboyis. Givaldig. Says Rabbi Yanai that tevel is only chayev in meiser. So, Kilu, if you harvest your field, all right, and you do all the harvest and everything, at what point are you not allowed to eat it, right? Because we said that, for example, the balabayas and the poil, they're allowed to eat from the produce while they're working and stuff. So clearly it's not tevel yet. Clearly yet it's not chayiv and trumas and maisrus. So at what point is that click? At what point is it now chayiv and trumas and maisrus, and that you can't eat it anymore? So again, Rabbi Yanai says, Rabbi Yanai, in a tevel mischayiv b'maiser achir pnei aboyis. That tevel is not chayiv in meiser until achir pnei aboyis, until you bring it into the house. Until you bring it into your house, it's not yet going to be chayiv in trumas and meiser. So you can eat it up until that point. You can eat it in sort of a just kind of a random fashion. For example, like while you're harvesting it, or if you're in the field. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, bi'arte hakodesh min aboyis. That by vidui meiser, it says that I have taken out all of the trumas from my house. That I guess the point is that the truma is considered truma once it's in the house. Rabbi Yochanan argues and he says, afilu chotzer kovas. Even if it hasn't yet gotten into the house, but so long as once it gets into the chotzer, into the courtyard, already at that point it's going to be chayiv in trumas and meisris. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, va'achlu b'sharecha v'saveyu. And I guess you will eat in your gates, and you will be satisfied. So even in your chutzner already, you'd be considered chayiv for trumas meiser. Wow, Chevra, I'm like, my hands are itching me, my nose as always is itching me. Well, it's going to be. What about? So what does Rabbi Yochanan do with Rabbi Yanai's pasuk, which says bi'arte hakodesh min aboyis, from the house? So Amalach Rabbi Yochanan would say chotzer dumya debayis. What it means is that it's the chotzer that's koveya, but the chotzer needs to be similar, a chotzer that's similar to a house. What does that mean? Mabayis hamishtamer av chotzer hamishtameres. Well, just like a house is guarded and protected, so oichit, we're talking about a chotzer that is I don't know, I guess has walls and maybe a lock, whatever the definition of guarded would be for a chotzer. Rabbi Yanai Nami Oksiv B'Sharecha, and Rabbi Yanai says that it has to get into the house. So then what does he do with the Rabbi Yechanan's pasuk of Achlu B'Sharecha V'Saveu? Haumi Boile Dima'ayule Derech Shar La'afuke Derech Gagis V'Karpefis. Rabbi Yanai learns from V'Achlu B'Sharecha, it means that when you're taking it into your house to be chayiv in trumas and meiser, you have to take it into your house by way of the chotzer. By way of the main entrance, the courtyard, not climbing up a ladder through a window or something like that, Then it has to be kind of go straight into the house in the normal way. Again, the ma'ayle derech shar, they bring it in via the gate, the main gate. La'afuke derech gagis v'karpefis. If you bring it in by way of sunlight, roof, by way of the roof, by way of an enclosure. Delo, it would not be chayiv in trumas and maisrus in that case. Most of Rav Chanina asked the kasha. What's the kasha? Most of Rav Chanina chozah. Okay, we learned at the end of the daf yesterday kinafshecha kach nafsho, that just like the soul of the balabayis, so is the soul of the worker. Right? Kinafshecha kach nafshe shel poyel, just like your soul, so is the soul of the worker. Manafshecha ochel ufoter, just like you can eat from the fruits and it will not be chayav yet in Trumas and Maisvis. Afnafshel shel poyel oichel ufoter, so oichet, the worker can eat and will not yet be chayav in Trumas and Maisvis. Haloi keyach chayav. So we're saying that the balabayis can eat and will not be chayav meiser, Trumas and Maisvis. The poyel, the worker, can eat and not be chayav in Trumas and Maisvis. But what about a purchaser? What if there's somebody who's come to buy produce and he's right there in the field? Can he eat it? Right, without Trumas and Maisvis, the implication is no. He would not be allowed to eat it. So my lab basode. And the implication is we're talking about in the field. So meaning even without going into the chotzer or into the house, already in the field, okay, maybe the balabais can eat it, maybe the poyel can eat it, but a lokeach would seem, right, the implication is that a lokeach would be unable to eat it in the field, which means already in the field, it's chayevis and trumas and maisris. So, Papi Acha Betena Ha'oimedes Begino V'Noifenote L'Chotzer Askinos. So says Rav Papa, you could say that there we're talking about a fig tree that is in a gino, it's in a garden, so not in the chotzer, not in the house, not in the chotzer. V'nofa, but its branches nota l'chotzer and go into the chotzer. Okay. Oskina, that's what we're talking about. So the tree is outside the chotzer, but the branches are in the chotzer. And according to the Mandamar who says, Rabbi Yana who says the house, so the branches go into the house. So that is why the lokeach is going to be, cannot eat it, is going to be chayiv in Trumas Maisus, because the branches go into the chotzer. But Yihachi, Balabayis Nami, Nichayiv. Well, if we're saying that the lokeach is chayiv Trumas Maisus and can't eat it without separating Trumas Maisus because the branches go into the chotzer or into the house, well then the same should apply to the balabais and the poil. Why should it be any different? Right? If we're saying that the chotzer and the bais is what's kovea, and here dafka the branches are going into the chotzer and the bais, well then the same should apply to a poil and lokeach. Why are we saying that a poil and lokeach can eat it? I'm sorry. The poil and the balabais can eat it, but the lokeach can't. So the lokeach can't eat it because it goes into the house or into the chotzer. Neither can the balabais or the poil. So balabais eino b'teinoso. Where am I? Did I skip? So balabais, I don't know what I just said. Balabais einov b'teinos of lokeach einov b'mikro. Well, the difference is that the balabais is thinking about the tree. He's thinking about his trees, and his trees are in the soda, are outside of the chotzer or outside of the bais, and therefore the balabais and the worker who's working the field, they can eat from the fruits without separating trumas and maisers because they're focused on the tree, and the tree is outside of the chotzer or the house. Whereas the lokeach, the purchaser, is focused on what he's buying, and he's buying the figs, and the figs are on the branches, and the branches are inside the house or inside the chotzer, which means that memele, once they're picked, they're going to be in the chotzer and the house, they're going to be chayiv in truma and maiser. Okay, fine. Okay, so that's the difference between the balabais and the poil on the one hand, who are focused on the tree, and the lokeach, who's focused on the fruits. V'lokeach midoraisa mi mechayiv. But 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second, 1 second. We just had this pasuk of kinafshecha kach nafsho shel poil manafshecha oichel ufoter haf nafsho shel poil oichel ufoter. Be'etzim, we had a pasuk to teach us that a poil, that a worker is allowed to eat the fruits while he's harvesting. Now, the thing is, right? It doesn't have to separate trumas and maisus. The thing is, we would only need a pasuk to allow a poil to eat it if midoraise a lokeach cannot eat it. Meaning, if midoraise a purchaser cannot eat these fruits in the field. So then, if midaraisa lokeach cannot eat the fruits in the field, so then we need another pasuk to say that a poil, however, a worker can eat the fruits while he's harvesting. It doesn't need separate chubas and maisus. But v'lokeach midaraisa mi mechayv. But is that really true? That a lokeach is chayv in chubas and maisus midaraisa and can't eat it before then? But v'atani, we learn it by some pnei ma'charvu chanuyos shel beis hino shalosh shanim kodem Yerushalayim. How come the stores of is it the stores? Wait, let me just confirm that. I feel like it might not be stores. Yep, it is. The shops, yeah. So, Miplema Charvu Chanuyo Shal Beis Hino Shalosh Shanim Kodem Yerushalayim. How come the stores of Beis Hino were destroyed 3 years before Yerushalayim was? Because they were sticklers for the Deoraisas. They weren't interested in the Derabanas. They only wanted to stick to the Deoraisas. And they would say, that when the pasuk says, "You shall surely separate tithes and eat them, velo mocher," and not the seller, that the seller would not need to separate trumas and maisus. Tvu zarecha velo lokeach, and not the lokeach that mido oraise. The lokeach does not need to separate trumas and maisus. So meaning, the people of Beis Hino, they would say, look, Mido Oraisa, a Lokeach doesn't need to separate Trumas and Maisus, so therefore they wouldn't do it. And that is why, and that is why their shops were destroyed. So we see from that Mido Oraisa Taka, the Lokeach doesn't need to separate Trumas and Maisus. So, right. So meaning, again, so back to our question. If we say that Lokeach is chayv and trumas and maiser is mido oraisa, so then I need a pasuk to teach me that a poil doesn't need to separate trumas and maiser; he can eat them as he's harvesting. Now, but that assumes that a Lokeach needs to separate trumas and maiser is mido oraisa. But we just said that the shops of Beis Hino were destroyed 3 years before the rest of Yerushalayim because they would say no, Lokeach doesn't need to separate trumas and maiser because that's only midrabanan. Right, because the obligation for Lokeach to separate Trumas and Maisus is only midrabanan. And if therefore it's derabanan, then why do I need the pasuk by a poil to allow it? Even a Lokeach doesn't need to separate Trumas and Maisus. So elami derabanan v'kras machta ba'alma. Rather, you're right. Right, the Lokeach separating Trumas and Maisus is only midrabanan. Okay, if that's the case, then why do I need a pasuk by a poil? We don't. It's just it's an asmachta. It's an asmachta. But we don't need a pasuk to allow it, because even a lokeach would be allowed as well. Mida oraisa. El kanashcha lemai also. But if that's the case, that we don't need a pasuk to allow a poil to eat while he's working without separating trumas and maisrus. If I don't need a pasuk for that, so then what's the deal with the pasuk, right? So what do you do with nafshecha? We're saying that's an asmachta. So then what's the real use of the pasuk? El kanafshecha lemai also. So what do we learn out from kanafshecha? Lichdetane, like we learn in the Brisa, kanafshecha manafshecha im chasamta potter. Well, just like you, the balabayis, if you prevent yourself from eating the fruits, that would be okay. You wouldn't be in violation of anything. How would you prevent yourself from eating the fruits? I guess either by saying I'm not eating these fruits, or maybe you can make a neder or something like that. But you know that would be okay. Apoilim chasamta potter. So even a poil, interesting. So it sounds like even though, right, we say that a poil needs to be able to eat, right, is entitled to eat when he's working the field. My understanding is that we're saying that if the balabais, however, would prevent him from eating, maybe I'm wrong here, but if the balabais would prevent him from eating, he would be potter. He would not be the balabais would not be in violation of losachsim shor bedisho. Okay? So that's what we learn out from nafshecha. Mosif Marzutra asakasha ezu gornon lemaisris. So at what point is produce chayav in trumas and maisris? Bekishuim uvidluim. When it comes to cucumbers and gourds, misha yipoksu. Once like the flower falls off, chever, I think it's an andere Zach in from what I remember from Chutz La'aretz, from what I remember from America, it's a little bit different. But here in Eretz Yisrael, you can go to Shuk Machne Yehuda and buy the most delicious cucumbers you've ever eaten in your whole life. You can also buy the most delicious tchina you've ever tasted in your whole life. And you can dip the most delicious cucumbers in the most delicious tchina, and that is some meichel, as my grandmother would say. Al Koponim, you could buy the most delicious cucumbers you've ever had in your life, and at the end of the cucumber there will be a withered flower that you gotta like pull off. Sorry, Mom. They gotta like pull off before you eat it. Sorry, Mom. So we're saying that the shaila is Ezu go to the maisus. At what point are they chayiv maisus? Bekishum v'dluib. Sorry, Mom. When it comes to cucumbers and gourds, mishei paksu. Once that flower falls off. So is that like when it falls off, like when like in my kitchen, or is that like when it gets like all withered and like that kind of thing? Although I think it might mean also like not every single cucumber has that. So maybe it's like once already like it gets to the point where they start falling off. We're going to see that actually in a minute. Okay. Anyways, fine. V'amar Rabasi says Rabasi misheinoto pikos shaloim. Once that flower starts falling off, so my lab mishei paksu afilu basad. So that implies once the flower falls off, even if it falls off in the field, it would be chayiv in Trumas Hamaisus, not necessarily the chotzer or the bayis. Lo nisht mishei paksu baboyis. Once the flowers fall off, not in the field, but once they're already in the house. According to Rabbi Yana in the chotzer, according to Rabbi Yochanan. If that's the case, mishei paksu ad shei paksu miboilev. If that's the case, then why does it say mishei paksu from the time that the flower falls off, which implies it could even be in the field? What it should really say is that it's not chayiv Trumas Hamaisus until the flower falls off, even once it's in the house. Well, itana ad shei paksu. Well, if it would say until the flower falls off, havamina, I might think ad digmai lepikusayu, until all the cucumbers, till the last cucumber's flower falls off. Only at that point would be chayiv Trumas Hamaisus. Kamashma mishei paksu michiaschule pikusayu. It's from when the flowers start to fall off. Like once the flowers are starting to fall off of the cucumbers and the gourds, so at that point it will be chayiv Trumas and Hamaisus. Okay, fine, but it is after. But we would say that it is once it's in the house or the chotzer. Most of Marzucha asked the kasha. Beidur of Nachman. Gorno lemaiser chayiv olav mishum tevel mishetigomer milachton vezugma milachton meleches achnososon malav. Okay, fine. Again, most of Marzucha Beidur of Nachman. Gorno lemaiser chayiv olav mishum tevel. So when it's considered in the goren, in the granary, when it's considered basically that you have to separate Trumas and Maisus, and it would be Tevel. Otherwise, Mishetigomer Melachton, once its work is complete, Ve'ezugmai Melachton, and what is the completion of its work? Mileches Achnososim, when you gather them together. My lab Achnososim afilu basod. The implication being, even when you gather them together in the field, they'll be chayiv in Trumas and Maisus, not the house or the chotzer. Lo Achnososim the bayis ze'ugmai Melachton. No, when you bring it into the house, when you gather it together in the house, that's when it's Gemar Melacha. Alternatively, when Rabbi Yanai says that they have to be brought into the house, alternatively, that's davka by grapes and olives, things that you don't put into a big pile on the field. So those, you could say that those, Rabbi Yanai says you have to bring in the house. You're not going to put them in a pile in the field. But wheat and barley, that you do pile them up in the field. Goren behedrik sivbei. So then, so there specifically, that would be by the, that would specifically be, even in the field when you pile them up. Interesting. Rashi didn't say anything here. Interesting. It was the first time it occurred to me that it doesn't. First time it occurred to me, it's like, wait, where does that actually say that? But so I just looked in the article. It says kidogon min agorin. So we see that by grain tafka, it says gorin, and that could be even piled up in the field, even if it hasn't been in the house yet. So that's an interesting distinction. I'll tell you why, because Yeah, it was always confusing to me. I guess maybe even it still is confusing to me. Like, there's like these different stages. There's like Meiruach. Like, I was always under the impression that Meiruach, after Meiruach, it's chayiv in Trumas Amaisus. Meiruach is when you, like, I don't know, flatten off the top of the pile or something. Once you pile it all together, then it's chayiv in Trumas Amaisus. But now you have Rabbi Yechon, Rabbi Yana, he has to go into the chutzner, he has to go into the house. So, like, yeah, which one is it? It's the field of the house. So, one thing that we just said is davka, no, when you gather it together, it's not in the field, it's davka in the house. Okay, so, and I don't know how Meiruach would fit into this, but we just made an interesting chilik, is that Meiruach, you could say, and maybe, I don't know, maybe this is the chilik, maybe this is the point, maybe it's not, I don't know, but based on this, maybe what you could say is that, well, it depends. If it's wheat and barley, things that you pile up, so then, yeah, piling up and doing Meiruach would be mechayiv in Meiser already, but things that you don't pile up, so then that would be Roy Pnei Abayis or Pnei or a Chatzor Kovas. So now Zok the Gemara Ashkechon Udam B'Mechuber or Givaldig V'Shor B'Tolosh Turu. This is going to take us to the end of the daf, alright? Final push. So we've had psukim to teach us that a person, a poyol, a worker can eat while he's harvesting. So the psukim that we had were while he's harvesting. So B'Mechuber. But if you have grapes, it's like a vineyard, and you have grapes, and you're harvesting them, right? They're connected to the ground, you're harvesting them. Or you have kama, you have grain that's still attached to the ground, and you harvest them with a sickle, right? So at that point you can eat them. What if you have things that are already disconnected from the ground, but they haven't yet completed their processing, right? They're not yet chayiv and trumas and maisus. How do we know that those you can eat? Well, where do we have the psukim for those? And also by shor it says lo sachsam shor bedisho, that you can't muzzle an ox while it is threshing. Threshing, you thresh things that are already disconnected from the ground. So the pasuk by animals is dafka by things that are already disconnected from the ground, and by people it's dafka things that are connected to the ground and you're harvesting them. So how do I know fakert? How do I know that people can also eat things that are disconnected to the ground so long as they're not yet chayav in trumas and maisus? And how do we know that a animal would be able to eat things that are connected to the ground, that I guess, I don't know, maybe they're plowing or whatever, and while they're harvesting it, I guess plowing is before harvesting, but I guess somehow if the oxen are involved in the harvest somehow, I guess. So Ashkechon Adam b'Mechubers, we have psukim that people, workers, can eat the produce when they are harvesting in. They're connected to the ground, they're harvesting them. V'shor b'Tolosh, and an ox when he's processing, right, he's threshing, processing disconnected things. Adam b'Tolosh minolan. How do I know that a person can also, when he's harvesting, if he's like processing things that are already separated from the ground, but are not yechayim trumas hamaisus, how do we know that, right, that he can eat those? Well, kal v'chomer. Okay, it's logical. Here we go. Get your kal v'chomer hat on. Sorry about. Kal v'chomer mishor. It's a kal v'chomer fin ashor. Uma ashor sheinu oichel b'mechuber. Well, by ashor, we don't have a pasuk by mechuber. We only have a pasuk by not mechuber, right? Threshing. Oichel. And yet, oichel b'tolosh, and yet we have losach shmshor b'disho, that a ox can eat disconnected things. Well, adam shoichel b'mechuber, in adam, a person that can eat even things that are connected to the ground and he's harvesting, and udin shoichel b'tolosh, well then certainly he should be able to eat things that are disconnected to the ground. But ma'aleshor shekain ata mitzuve al chasim also. Say, but one second. We had said earlier that kinavshecha, right, just like there's no lav against the balabayas not eating, right, preventing himself from eating these things. So there's also no lav for preventing your worker from eating these things. Yet there is a lav, losachsim shor bedisho, for an ox. So therefore, I might say that an ox is more stringent. That there's a lav against preventing the ox, but not so a person. So maybe a person cannot eat disconnected things, so you can't necessarily learn enough from an ox. Would you apply the same to a person, a human being, whom you are not? There's no lav against chasima. Okay, but why don't we make a kal v'chomer and say that there should be a lav against preventing a poil from eating. Mishor, let's learn it out from the ox. Umashor she'at mitzuva lachyoso. Right, there's a pasuk by people v'cheyo chicha imach that you have to make sure that your brother lives with you. That I guess you benefit him, help him out. You don't have such a thing by a chomer. So again, where am I? By a shore. So let's say a kavachomer from a shore, right, to say that you should be mitzuva al chasimoso by a person, because umashor she'iyata mitzuva lachyoso by an ox, you do not have a chiyuv of v'cheachicha imach ata mitzuva al chasimoso, and yet you are not allowed to prevent the ox from eating while it's working. Right? I don't know what I just said. You're not allowed to prevent. Right? You have to allow the ox to eat while it's working. Where am I? Adam shata mitzuva lachyoso. So a person who you have a chiyuv of v'cheachicha imach, you have a chiyuv to let him live, to help him out. And udin shata mitzuva al chasimoso. Certainly you should be prevented from preventing him. Double negative. Prevented from preventing him from eating. Certainly you must allow him to eat while he's working, and if not, then it'll be allowed. So where are we? Oh my gosh, we're in Kavachomer quagmire, Chaver. We know about Kavachomers from Masechta Kiddushin. Kavachomers are quagmire, but this isn't such a big quagmire. But where are we again? I don't know. What are we trying to do? Where are we? What's my name? Anyways, we're trying to figure out how do we know that a person can, who's harvesting, can eat stuff that's even disconnected. We want to learn out from a shore, because a shore is not that we don't have a pasuk by mechuber, but he can eat things that are disconnected. We said yeah, but a shore you have a chiyuv against chasima, which is not the case by a person. We said, oh yeah, but you should have a thing of chasima by a person, because there's v'chei achicha imach, to which we say that no, because amakra kinafshecha shapoil kach nafsho kinafsho shapoil manafsho im chasamto potter. Right, as we said earlier, that we have the pasuk that says kinafshecha, that just like the balabayis, there's no problem with him preventing himself from eating these things before trumas and ma'asos. Apoil im chasamto potter, you'd also be potter for preventing him from eating while he's working. So we have a pasuk to say otherwise, that we do not apply. There's no lav of chasima by a person, but there is a lav of chasima by a shore. So therefore, we can't learn out that a person is allowed to eat bitalush while he's working from a shore. Okay, okay, fine. So back to our original question. Then how do we know that a person who's working with already disconnected stuff before it's chayv and trumas and ma'asos can eat? It says in the pasuk by kama, right? So that was the pasuk where we learned that a person who's harvesting things that are connected to the ground is allowed to eat while he's harvesting. But it says in that pasuk kama twice. Beis paimim. If we don't need it to teach me the second one, we don't need the second one to teach me that a person who's harvesting can eat stuff, because that's from the first one. So what do we learn from the second one? So let's say that it's teaching that even once the produce is disconnected, he could still, right? This worker can still eat from it so long as it's not chayv and trumas and ma'asos. Reb Ami Omar says, Reb Ami, Adam b'talush lo tzarich kra. Reb Ami says, I don't need a pasuk to teach me that a person can eat when it's disconnected, because ksiv kisavo b'cherem re'echa, because we have, right, one of those psukim by the workers is when he goes into the vineyard of his friend. Milo eskinon shescharo likatof. Isn't it obviously, right? Meaning we don't need a separate pasuk to teach me that a person can eat bitalush when he's working with talush, because after all, one of the psukim that we have by workers is kisavo b'kerem re'echa, when you go into your friend's vineyard. And mistama, it's going into your friend's vineyard to do any of the jobs that need to be done in the vineyard. Sure, it could be talking about harvesting. It could also be talking about processing and selecting things that have already been harvested. right? So Mistama is talking about any of the work that needs to be done there, whether it's connected to the ground, whether it's already disconnected from the ground. And it says, right, and you can eat nonetheless. But Rahman Alecho, and the Torah says that you can eat it. Okay, fine. Givaldik. So by a person, he can eat when he's harvesting things that are connected to the ground. He can eat things that are disconnected from the ground. Shor b'mechuber min olam. Now, our second question: how do we know that a shor is allowed to eat from the things that he's harvesting? So, where we have losachsim shor b'disho by things that are disconnected, how do we know even things that are connected to the ground? Kavachomer me'odam. We learn it out from a kavachomer, from a person. Uma'udam she'eno ochel b'tolush. A person who we have no pasuk to say that he's allowed to eat b'tolush, or at least not by default, we have to learn it out. Ochel b'mechuber, and yet we do have explicit psukim that he can eat b'mechuber. Shor she'ochel b'tolush, a shor that's allowed to eat b'tolush, and udin she'ochel b'mechuber, certainly then the shor should be able to eat b'mechuber. But ma'ala adam shchinat mitzvah la'achyoso. Yeah, but a person is different because you have a chiyuv to help out and to make sure your brother can live and eat, which is not a chiyuv that you have by an ox. So maybe an ox is davka with things that are disconnected, but not things that are connected. Toma b'shor she'yata mitzvah la'achyoso. Will you apply the same thing to an ox where you don't have the chiyuv la'achyoso? V'yei shor mitzvah la'achyoso mekav v'chomer. But let's say that a shor you should have a chiyuv la'achyoso from a kav v'chomer. That if by a person where there's no lav against chasima, and yet there's a chiyuv la'achyoso, meaning you could prevent, right? If you prevent the person from eating, you're not violating a lav, and yet you still have the principle, right, the chiyuv of che'achicha imach. So shor shata mitzvah al chasimaso, assure that you are in violation of a lav if you prevent it from eating while it's working. Enu din shata mitzvah la'achyoso. Certainly you should have a chiyuv to make sure it lives good. So Amakra, the pasuk says v'che'achicha imach, achicha v'lo shor. Yeah, but it says v'che'achicha, your brother. You have this chiyuv la'achyoso, but not a shor. Okay, fine. So how do we know that a shor can eat things that are connected to the ground or while it's harvesting? The pasuk says re'echa beis paimim. It says in that pasuk Yisava becomes re'echa because after milalos biadecha v'chemish l'san v'akamas re'echa. It says it twice. Im eino inyan la'adam. So if we don't need it to teach us by a la'adam b'mechuber, to teach about about a person b'mechuber, because we have other psukim already. Say it's talking about an ox when it is. No, I'm sorry. If it's not this, if the second one is not needed for adam b'mechuber, because we already have the first one from which we learned that out. So say it's talking about a shor b'mechuber. Ravina Amar says, Ravina lo adam b'talish v'lo shor b'mechuber tzrichei kroy. Ravina says, look, we don't need a pasuk for adam b'talish, and we don't need a pasuk for shor b'mechuber. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says osachsom shor b'disho. The pasuk says that you cannot muzzle an ox when it is threshing. Now michte, fact the Gemara. Kol mile isnu b'chasima. That all that what does Rashi say? Michte kol mile isnu b'chasima. Klomer al korchech shor lav davka. When it says in the pasuk shor, it doesn't mean explicitly a shor. I'm in the first Rashi on Pei Testament Aleph. And it includes all animals in chasima. Tiafin shor shor mishabes beperek shor shenagach chesapara. The Shabbat ksiv v'chol be'emtecha. V'chem nishol davka lomeli dekos v'rachman lichtov lo tidosh b'chasima. That when it says shor, we learned that in BavaMetzia. When it says shor, we learn gzer shava shor from Shabbos, and Shabbos says v'chol be'em. What's it? V'chol be'emtecha. What? What? I can't even remember. But it says v'chol be'emtecha. I guess it's probably like in. I don't know. V'chol be'emtecha. It says by shore. What do you want me to tell you? Take it up with somebody else. Anyways, wait 1 second. No, it's Jarmina. No, I think it's a different pasuk, and I don't think that we have that pasuk here. So sorry. But anyways, Does it say it anywhere? There you go. Anyways, so when it says shor, it's lav davka. It means all animals. So if that's the case, then it could just say lo sach. What does it say? So shor mishabes. Lo sidosh b'chasima. It could just say lo sidosh b'chasima. You don't need lo sachsum shor b'dishos. So the question is, why does it say shor? Right. So again, dichsiv lo sachsum shor b'disho. Michdei kol mile yisnu b'chasima. When it says shor memele includes all animals. So the afinit shor mishabes is luna gzeir shava shor over here from Shabbos, and by Shabbos it's not just the shor, but it's v'chol b'emtecha. It's all animals. So just let it say lo sidosh b'chasima. You don't need shor. So shor the cause of achman lamali. So why does it say shor? La'kushe chosim v'nechsom l'choshim. Because when it says lo sachsom shor, it's lo tachsom. You, the balabayis, should not be chosem a shor, and it's to compare the shor to the chosem. So ma chosem ocha b'mechuber af nechsem ocha b'mechuber. Just like we said that by the person he can eat while he's harvesting things that are connected to the ground, so too the animal. Uma nechsem ocha b'tolosh. Just like an animal says lo sachsem shor b'disho, it can eat things that are disconnected. Af chosem ocha b'tolosh. So also the person who's working the field can eat things that are disconnected from the ground. That was the peches of Masechta BavaMetzia. There was a lot of really interesting stuff here. The machlokas between Rabbi Yanai and Rabbi Yochanan about at what point is produce chayiv and shumas meiser. Rabbi Yanai says from the time that it gets in the house. Rabbi Yochanan says from the time that it gets in the chotzer. Even according to Rabbi Yanai, says from the time that it gets into the house, that could go into the main entrance, not by other ways. These are all halachas that come up from time to time throughout our journey through Shas. And we also saw an interesting potential chilik, I guess, about when is something chayiv and trumas and meisus when it's in a pile versus when does it have to go into the house. We suggested maybe that a chilik is that, well, it depends. If it's things that normally are piled up, so then once the pile is complete. But if it's things that are not normally piled up, like olives or grapes, then it's from the time that it gets in the house, arguably. Okay, and then we learned about, we just kind of got into the details a bit about people being able to eat while they're working and animals eating while they're working. That was the peches of Masechta BavaMetzia. Hope you enjoy. Peace out.